And stuff at this point is now just flying across the house at random. My children are watching stuff fly. And we'd pick it back up, we'd put it back where it came from, and then 10 seconds later it'd go flying again. So we were all, I think understandably, terrified.
Yes, and many children see them too. About 75% of the world's children today are being born with etheric vision. And when your children talk with people and have daydream playmates, the chances are they are actually speaking to some of these people. Because these angels or angelic forces or nature spirits, as they're often called, will often make themselves seen.
The color just drains from her face. And I'm kind of stumped because I could tell that something is truly shocking her right now, but I have no idea what the deer in headlights kind of turned into almost like a panic.
And I said, I've never seen a butterfly like you before.
I know that the paranormal is real. Listen.
As soon as I spoke to it, it turns around and makes eye contact with me, and then it stands upright.
And it was at that moment that I saw it was like an orange light appear above this row of trees. And from this sort of orange light, this thing appeared. Its wings were actually like sycamore leaf shaped.
And I started talking to them. I'm like, hi, are y'all the dwarves? And I would hear whispers that would say, hi, yeah, you want to play? And it wasn't just my imagination. And I had told them, I'm like, my dwarves, they like beer, you know? And my dad's like, yeah, sure, your dwarves like beer. And they were holding a conversation, and his beer slid upwards instead of downwards, how the house was tilted. And him and my brothers jumped up.
So I stopped calling out Adam, and I'm just kind of, my mind draws a blank, and I stop behind that tree stump. I'm pretty close to it now because I took a few steps forward, and I see this thing.
It's 8:05. This is Phyllis in the office. A cat is...
Welcome everybody tonight to Fascinating Fae. Tonight, we're traveling to the Pacific Northwest to talk with Harper. Harper, how are things going tonight in the Pacific Northwest?
You know, they're beautiful and green and wonderful as always.
Well, that's really nice to hear. I want to just say I certainly appreciate you taking some time out of your day to join me here on the show. Before we jump into things, I spend usually about 1 minute at the start of every episode just giving the lay of the land for guests. Would it be cool if I took some time and did that for you now?
Absolutely.
Okay, so, Harper, we had a chance to speak offline, but you never know who's dropping in for the first time. So the first order of business here on the show is that myself, you, the guest, we're not here to convince anybody of anything. It's literally impossible to validate these experiences, and I don't put emphasis on proving it to me. I take it as a given that if you're willing to come forward and speak about these affairs and matters, stuff is going on. And I'm trying always to explain to the guests and to the audience, no one's an expert and no one knows for sure. So let's not put an emphasis on that.
Sure.
The second thing is that I want to extend my appreciation for your bravery coming on the show. I talked to you about some of the real consequences involved in speaking about this stuff. It's brave to come on the show. It's brave to muster the courage to talk about these events honestly. And I don't know. It's a burden to find yourself having these experiences on some level. So it is brave to be honest about burdens. And so it's brave to come on the show. And I do appreciate that. I want you to know.
Thank you.
Finally, the interview style that I usually adopt is one in which I would like to remain silent and let you have as much time and space as necessary to build a full contextual picture and, give as much detail as you want. So there's no rush, and I'm always a big fan of more is more, not less is more. Feel free to tell me about the situation, yourself, what was going on in the lead up. That kind of stuff that feels relevant to you is something I'd like to hear. And then, of course, walking me through the events sequentially, or maybe intuitively, however you feel they need to be unfolded. I'm here to hear it all, and there's no rush. And I want to make sure you know that.
Yeah, thank you.
So with all that said, that concludes my intro. What I'll ask you to do is, as aforementioned, if you'd be so kind, just walk myself and the audience into this incredible story that you've come here to tell tonight, please.
Yeah, so my story is actually, it is both from a long time ago and it's also very, very recent. I was raised in a family that was it's difficult to articulate. I would say that my mother is more spiritual, more pagan, but she never pressed that upon us. She never even taught us about this growing up. It was just sort of an openness and an awareness that there were lots of things and energy that could be accessed, and it was understood, but again, it was never taught to us or impressed upon us. So I think I always sort of had an open mind when it came to these sorts of situations. That being said, I didn't have anything overly noteworthy until probably a couple of years ago. And for context, I'm in my 30s, so many decades of normalcy leading up to this point. And I had in my yard that cropped up one summer a fairy ring of toadstools, and they were probably 6 feet across from side to side. And I remember just a little piece of information in the back of my mind about not ever stepping in them. So I always kept the neighbor kids out of them. And the interesting thing about these toadstools or this fairy circle is that whenever the lawn was mowed, they were completely untouched. It didn't matter how tall or short the grass was, the blade would not scratch any of these mushrooms. And we had in the house that I was living in at the time, a couple of small events that were easily chalked up to, oh, this was misplaced, or oh, this was weird. I must have just not been paying attention or done something strange. But I'm not convinced, looking back, that my being protective of this fairy ring didn't sort of begin to set off a chain of events. So we ended up moving effectively across the street. We live in a place that's very close to our original home. And the next summer, the fairy ring came back, and the exact same thing was completely untouchable. And I was at a little shop one day, and there was a conversation happening between the cashier and one of the customers, and they were talking about fairies. And so because I live in a very small town and everyone is so social and there's only the 3 of us in this shop, I join in this conversation and I'm asking questions. And it was from that moment forward that things began. And in fact, I went to purchase something right after the customer in front of me had left. And immediately my card was in the opposite pocket than the one that I had put it in. And I was joking with the cashier that like, oh, I guess they're here. I guess they know. And from then on out, it was always initially with some level of plausible deniability. And so it was, there was always a level of, has this seed been planted or is this real? And so, initially it was things disappearing and reappearing, or things being not quite where I left them. And I started paying more attention. And I think what really solidified it was when I would do things that were things that I know I didn't do, or things would happen that I know I didn't do, such as I made sure at one point to put the lid down on the trash can because there was something in there I didn't want to. I have a dog and a cat, and I didn't want them to be tempted to pull it out of the trash can. So I made sure the lid was closed. And I stepped away for 30 seconds, and I came back, and the lid was standing open. My dog hadn't moved. My cat hadn't moved. Only the trash can lid. I also have had, as a side note, 3 different IDs completely disappear. And have to be repurchased. So I've had to state out loud that nobody is allowed to have my name or identity. I don't know if that does anything at all. But at this point, it's just silly games. Things escalated probably 2 weeks later from this point, and that is when shit hit the fan, for lack of a better word. The energy in my house started feeling very, very chaotic. It was a bit frat party energy, just very, very dense, very, very packed. My electronics started all acting bizarrely, almost exclusively when I interacted with them. I have an Alexa, and I would put on a song, and 10 seconds into the song, it would pause. And I couldn't get it to start. I would restart it, 10 seconds, and it would pause and pick a different song over and over and over. My phone was glitching, just all the technology was just completely unresponsive. And that was frustrating, but I mean, again, nothing substantial. There was, however, one morning, it was a Saturday morning at about 11:30 in the morning, when it was about 2 or 3 days after the electronics started being weird. Lots more stuff had started moving around and being chaotic, and the energy had shifted. I initially wrote this off as a complete fluke. I have a service dog who has been professionally trained. She has gone through personality assessments. She's got years and thousands of dollars worth of training. This is a dog that I have never seen show any level of aggression. I have never seen this dog growl. She's calm. She's well behaved. And she was laying down on the floor, and my son, who is the 10-year-old that I mentioned before we began this formally, went to shift her head to close the door, and she let out the most bizarre, startled scream, and she whipped around and she bit him across the face. And when I spoke to him about it later, he swears up and down that her eyes were open, she was awake, she was looking at him, and this is a dog that you could stick your big toe in her ear and she would not care. She loves her children. She's not aggressive. And so that in itself was, again, I mean, it was very, very traumatic. It was very bizarre. There were some pretty substantial injuries that were sustained. We spent the day in the hospital. It was very, very traumatic. And the next day, and by the way, I do want to add, as soon as this happened, she immediately almost came to. So almost like she was in some sort of trance or something. And so the bite wasn't even a complete mouth closed because she realized who it was halfway through. And then she went and tried to hide under the bed because she felt terrible. And so we, got my son taken care of and got his face stitched back together, came home the next day, because it had been a very rough day prior. My husband was like, you know what? You need to get out of the house. You need to relax. Why don't you go to get some pho? There's a wonderful little pho place just down the road. And I have been to this pho place. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say more than 100 times. And they do a phenomenal job. I've never had a hair in my food or there's a smudge on my glass. I've never had any instance with any issues at all. And I was eating the pho, and for anybody who doesn't know, pho is a soup. So it's not a hard food. And I put the noodles in my mouth, and all of a sudden I was like, there's something wrong. This isn't right. And I would chew a couple bites and it would seem normal, and then I'd take a bite and it was weird again. And I was trying to pull whatever it was out of my mouth. And I couldn't find anything. And finally, I grabbed something and I pulled it out of my mouth. And it was a wire. It was a metal wire. How a metal wire made it into soup, and then my mouth again was a bit terrifying. I almost swallowed it. I went home. I was a little freaked out. And at this point, I still wasn't going, oh, this is fairies. I was like, this is a string of terrible luck. But again, the energy in my house was thick and it was intense. And we had more and more, all of us were seeing things out of the corner of our eyes. You would turn your head and it was gone. There would be, all of us saw, it was more like a shadow. So it was almost a reverse impression. So they would be like a dark, sort of distorted thing. At one point I would see sparkles, but they weren't bright, sunshiny. It was almost inverted. They were black, but not black. They were kind of a gray sort of thing. We would see dark shapes. We would see all kinds of things. And this was Sunday night. And I noticed my cat was very, very agitated. She's normally very calm. She's a Maine Coon and she just sleeps all the time. And she was licking her tail and hissing at nothing. And then my dog was, the best way that I can describe this is, she's a Saint Bernard and she was doing ballet. And I don't mean she was on her toes twirling. I mean, it was this rollicking through the flowers. She did two graceful, gravity-defying leaps through the air, and like she was trying to play with something that was probably about 2 or 3 feet off the ground. And it was beautiful, and it would have been adorable if it wasn't so disconcerting and if people weren't actively, seemingly in danger. And I called out her name, and immediately she had snapped out of it. She looked back and she came over and she was back to normal, like she had no idea what had happened. She was she was back to normal. And at this point, I didn't want to let my children out of my sight. I didn't want my husband to leave because I was like, there's something very, very wrong that is happening here. So we get everybody settled. We get everybody to bed. And my husband and I are going to bed. And 2 of our cell phones were plugged in and just sitting on a table near the bed, probably about 8 feet away from us. And the next thing you know, both of them, just one after another, went flying across the room, crashed to the floor. And we're looking at each other, and it was very, very scary when things are being actively thrown. And throughout all of this, the trick had continued, but they no longer felt like fun little games. It almost felt more haunting. So, for example, we had got all of the kids 2 of them got a Robux gift card, and the third one, who's substantially older, we got some cash in case she wanted to get herself a treat. And my husband, who'd had, like the rest of us, a stressful several days, he took a nap. And when he woke up, all the cash and the Robux gift cards had been in his pocket. The cash was still there, but the Robux gift cards were on the windowsill across the room, and they were kind of in this fanned out decorative position, just almost like to show what they had done. And so this was, I think this takes us through Sunday night. The next day, my husband, of course, had to go to work. My kids went to school. And, my older child and my youngest went to school. My middle child is the one that had a face full of stitches, and he did not go to school that day. We went to the doctor instead. But nobody was really home at this point in time. And so I took my child back to the person who was talking about fairies. They had a level of knowledge and authority. And I was like, what do you do if they're mad? They think they're mad. And he was like, well, why do you think they're mad? And I was like, well, my very sweet dog bit my son. He's like, I don't think that would be them. And we went on to explain all of these other pieces. And as we're explaining, he just gets more and more and more concerned. And so he's like, okay, well, here's what you want to do. And he instructed us to get fresh, raw, unpasteurized goat's milk, raw local honey, just pure honey. And he gave us instructions on mixing it, and 3 pieces of pyrite, and all of these very traditional fairy lore offerings. And I did learn this happened late October, so we were closing in on not just Halloween, which is supposed to be the thinning of the veil. I believe it was the fall equinox, and it was a full moon, so it was supposed to be like triple threat of thinning of the veil accessibility, which is not something that I had normally taken into consideration because this was not something that I had normally experienced. So I went home, I texted my husband, and I was like, okay, here's what we need to do to make sure that everybody's safe. And he's like, okay, well, we'll do this when I get home from work. And this chaotic frat party is the best word I have. Energy had continued throughout all of this. We came home after school. I'm trying to get everybody dinner. And stuff at this point is now just flying across the house at random. My children are watching stuff fly. And we pick it back up, we put it back where it came from, and then 10 seconds later it's flying again. So we were all, I think understandably terrified. At this point, and I was like, I can't wait. So I took my children, we left, we went to the store, and found, again, raw goat's milk, local honey. I still have the jar, and I have fairy written all over this jar so that nobody will mess with it because it's for them. And we still do regular offerings to them. But I came home and the sun went down and it was about midnight. And I saw our neighbors watching us when we went to take care of everything. And I'm sure we looked absolutely insane because it was midnight and it's cold and we're pretty close to the Canadian border. So it gets pretty cold pretty quickly, in the fall and winter. But I have all of my children and everybody outside at midnight, and we walked over to the fairy circle. And one thing that I did forget to mention is that a second one had actually cropped up about 20 feet away from the first one. This one was smaller. It was probably 2-3 feet across. When it popped up, and it had been there for probably a week at most. So, so we walked over actually to both of them, but we went to the first one, and we showed them this bowl of raw goat's milk and honey, and I said, this is our offering to you. And we walked to the side and set it off to the side, and we're like, it's going to be right over here. And then I had a conversation with them, and I told them that the pain that they were experiencing, we had attributed to I hate to keep jumping back, I apologize, but during this conversation with this gentleman about the fairies and about them being mad, there was discussion about why are they doing this? What had we done? And the only thing that we could come up with wasn't even anything that we had done. We live close to an interstate, probably a quarter of a mile away, and they had recently begun cutting down all of the trees in the area to expand and take it from a 2-lane highway to a 4-lane, or going each way, so 8-lane highway. And it wasn't even, it was not a gentle death for these trees that were easily over 100 years old. They were burning through them and then ripping the trunk out of the ground. And so the best we could come up with is that these were effectively displaced and had come to my house and were very, very angry about this situation and were lashing out because of this. And so I set down the goat's milk and the honey, and I told them that I understand how horrific this is, and I have so much compassion for it, and I don't agree with it, and I don't condone it, and I cannot stop it. And there are a bunch of mature trees near my house, and so I told them that they were all welcome to take up residence in those trees if that was something that they felt compelled to do, that this was, goat's milk and honey for them. I also had 3 pieces of pyrite. I was told that 3 is a very significant number because, again, I'm completely clueless. I was throwing everything that I had at this problem. Like I said, I'd almost swallowed wire at this point. I had a child with a face full of stitches. I was not taking any risks. So I put down 3 pieces of pyrite. I also had some seeds that we'd used to plant a garden earlier in the summer. And I took 3 different types of seeds, and we threw the seeds around and just told them, you can do with these seeds as you would like. And we went over and acknowledged to both of the rings. And I told my children and I told my husband to take my children and go back inside. And the rule is, when you leave, you don't look. And so I was like, no matter what happens, you don't look back. And so I sent them inside, and I just sat there for a minute, and I just talked to these fairy circles, and I told them, that we wanted to have a peaceful, mutually beneficial relationship, and that we would try and educate ourselves and do the best that we could, that we had no ill will and we wanted to cause them no harm. And just said whatever came to mind to bridge this gap. And then I went inside and put everybody to bed because it's after midnight. And then I went to bed. And I got up the next morning and I put my dog on the leash, and we did just a loop around the yard so that she could go potty. And as I was walking back inside, I was walking up my stairs, and my stairs they're wood and metal. They're not fancy. They're incredibly mundane stairs. A penny fell into my shoe from nowhere. And it was my left shoe. And I pulled this penny out, and I was like, that was bizarre. And it was a penny that was from 2007. And it is the most perfect penny I have seen in my entire life. So for a penny that was almost 20 years old, it was not oxidized. It didn't have a single scratch on it. None of the pictures or anything were worn down at all. It was just a fresh, newly minted penny from 2007. And so I took that as a sign of acceptance and acknowledgement for what had happened 8 hours ago. And I went inside and I set it down and felt so much better and so much calmer. And fairly immediately, the energy in my house went back to normal. It didn't have this chaotic, agitated party vibe. And there was still sometimes things that would move around, but it wasn't malicious in nature anymore. It was more just, we're still here. And I had to set some ground rules in my house. And I spoke out loud about, if they're going to be in here, they're welcome in my household, but they are not allowed to cause physical, mental, emotional, psychological, or financial harm, intentionally or otherwise. And just, again, trying to cover all of the bases. And I have not had any issues with aggression since. I have since had 3 different pennies appear in my left shoe. It's always my left shoe. And when I looked it up, my family is English, Irish, very old German, Danish, kind of that region of the world. And if you look up a lot of the old German fairy tale lore, the left shoe is associated with paranormal. And just like in Germany, they leave their shoes out for Saint Nick. Gifts in the shoes are signs of blessing and goodwill. And this was not something that I was aware of until I had looked it up. But I was later speaking to my mom about these experiences, and her response was, "Oh yeah, I've had fairies my whole life," and I was never mentioned. I did not know, but I did know that she would always do things like have wind chimes. She had special wind chimes that would play musical chords, and she had all of these things. And she's like, "Well, yeah, that's for the fae. That's why we do that." And so they seem to be very deeply tied to my family line, because when I started asking other people, I have a cousin who brought them up of her own accord, and she's like, "Yes, I can see them." And we all seem to have different species, types, I don't know. Because when I speak to my mom, she'll say they're probably 6 to 8 inches tall. Mine, whether I see like a shadow figure or I can see what they look like in my mind's eye, but not with my actual eyes. And what they look like to me are, the best word I have is a gnome. They're probably the size of a 3 or 4-year-old child. They look hewn from stone. It's like a stone clay kind of thing. They're not sculpted. They're more just stuck together in a rough humanoid shape. The proportions are wrong. The arms are shorter, the legs are shorter, the head is bigger, and they're covered in what appears to be like a mossy, leafy sort of thing. And those are the ones that I see. And the ones that hang around me, they're not, to the few people that I've tried to describe this to, I say they're not Tinkerbell. They're not winged. They're not small. They're not beautiful in the traditional fairy sense. They feel like a cranky old man in many ways. They feel very ancient and old and unyielding and very well set in their ways. I mean, I don't know if that even makes sense in a description, but they, I always feel like they have, that they're around. Sometimes I have 2 or 3 in my house. There's usually always at least one, and I can sense where in my house they are. And I can tell how many there are, even if I can't lay eyes on them. I've also always had a black thumb, and I have since been able to grow all kinds of plants. I don't take credit for that. That's just, the plants in my house no longer die, which is great. And I think since then, and this is, I say this like a minor detail after the fact, but I think the most significant event that has happened since then is I think they gave me a pair of shoes. And I don't know if that means I have a leprechaun. I don't know. But I opened the door one day and there was a pair of beautiful leather sneakers in a box on my doorstep. They weren't wrapped. It wasn't like Amazon delivered a package to the wrong house. There was no name. There was no note. And nobody, and I've lived here quite a while. I don't get other people's packages at my house. I don't anything like that. But nobody knew where they came from. Nobody reached out saying, "Oh, hey, these shoes got dropped off on the wrong doorstep." It's been 6 months. And nobody has any idea where they came from. It was just a box of shoes. They fit me perfectly. They're beautiful. They're leather.
I was going to ask you, are they your size? Thanks
Yes.
for saying that, as couldn't hold my tongue any longer. Wow.
Yes, they are my size.
Okay, Harper, is there any additional details you want to add now before I get the privilege of asking you some questions?
I think the only other significant detail is when I mentioned the summer fairy rings. When the seasons transitioned, they went away with the season, and then I got 2 new fairy rings. One in the same spot, same size, same shape, but it was an entirely different species of mushroom. And I got a second one, same size as the second one, but in a different location, around a cut down tree stump.
Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating storytelling. Can I ask a kind of unusual question, but this is more for, I guess, the audience than anything, because I already know the answer. Can you just verify for me, you've only listened to just a small amount of the show?
Yeah. So I was just flipping through podcasts looking for something to listen to, and I listened to a little bit and just felt compelled to reach out. And it was less about me personally and more about wanting to almost, I don't want to treat it as a cautionary tale, but the importance of awareness and respect, and that it's not always this, fun and games, light and love, bright sort of situation, that they are maybe unpredictable, or they do have a darker side, and being aware and intentional and not messing with things, it can have consequences.
I asked that question simply because, without knowing it, your storytelling there, if you could imagine like a hug, for example, your storytelling there is a hug that just encompassed the entire catalog.
Oh, okay.
You have experienced in sequence events that many people have experienced a singular portion of.
Oh, okay.
And you've experienced a workflow, I'll call it, of, initial event through to understanding, all the way through to resolution, all of which is very, very evocative of the many, many conversations I've published. And so it's extremely validating, I hope, for you to hear back that you have just sounded like everybody without really even knowing it. But at the same time, that's extremely validating for the catalog in a way. There's a few people, maybe 3 or 4, that I've spoken to whom are experiencing the degree of insight and contact that you are. And I would even go so far as to say a lot of your insights there mirror many of the insights I've had, not the least of which is that it is not always nice. And this does not belong under a fantasy, child's play kind of moniker. The subject belongs under a much more serious subject header. So maybe that is the very difference between fairies and fae, just in terms of how one holds that term in one's heart. But I digress. So, okay, can I feed back to you what I heard there? And
yeah, absolutely.
From there, I'll start asking questions. So I get it. Like, first of all, very interesting about the mushrooms that won't be damaged when the lawnmower is cutting. On the surface, I think people might miss that. That's pretty magical. I hear what you're saying there. And your intuition that these fairy rings may have something to do with the presence of the fae is, I think, that detail of the mushrooms not being damaged is very interesting to contemplate when you think about, are these rings related? I'll just leave that there. But so it sounds like your dog briefly thought your child was one of these things, is what it really sounds like.
I don't know.
I've spoken to enough people for whom pets have had direct interactions with entities that they can see. That verifies to me that the animal kingdom is most likely able to perceive the presence of these entities with their eyes and other senses more or less full time. And if what you're describing tracks, which is there's kind of a growing presence, which I think you've established through everything you've just told me, that there was in fact always something in there. It may have been off-putting to your dog, and he may have, been on high alert because of that. It could also be random and bad luck, but when you tell me everything you've told me, did I hear you correct that your son kind of went to just like move your dog over to close the door, and that's when it happened?
Yes, he said her eyes were open and she was looking at him, and then she reacted.
So interesting. Very interesting. Let's kind of like put a pin in that one particular aspect of it, because although I appreciate how your intuition has tied it into the storytelling, in a way it's dismissible because it's, dogs and animals do strange stuff sometimes, and it does happen, but paired with the description of your dog like doing ballet, I think adds validity to your earlier hypothesis. But I think just for the purposes of like getting into where I can get into your story that I can add value to, we'll just move past that one a little bit, even though I actually agree with you. And my sense is more that either he thought it was one of them for a second and was mistaken, or something like that is what it feels like to me. But again, either of us could be wrong on that particular one. Is it a Saint Bernard that bit your 10-year-old in the face?
Yes.
Wow, lucky kid. Whoa, to be like not less hurt. Wow.
Yeah, it was right across kind of where the eyes are, and so we're lucky that. So hopefully this isn't too graphic. There was a cut and a puncture on one eyelid. The second eyelid was ripped back, and then there was about 1.5 inch gash that was almost to the skull.
Wow.
And that was not a full bite, because she realized about halfway through closing her mouth who that was and let go, and like ran.
That's why I wonder what she was looking at right before. And anyhow, there's something there. I think you're right. There's something there associated with this growing sense of chaos that you're describing in the lead up. First of all, I should also mention like a few things. Number one, you're a very articulate and pragmatic storyteller. I kept listening and letting it unfold, and as you went deeper and deeper and got to certain details like your phones flying and stuff, I was like, It just absolutely tracks with what I would expect to hear from somebody who's having real encounters. None of it strikes me as contrived. None of it strikes me as unusual. In fact, I've heard so much of it before. So my deep gratitude, because you have really allowed for a summary of many of the elements of this podcast in your unique story here. And so you're really coming forward with something extremely valuable to everyone listening. So thank you for having that response to the initial time you listened. I'm so glad that you felt called to come forward, because I love this right now. Okay, so wow. So first, okay, there's so many like details that you shared there that I want to dig into. Your 3 missing IDs. Can you give me some examples of how these went missing? 3 is a lot. It's unusually high.
So 2 of them were mine. 1 of them is my husband's.
Okay. Wow, interesting. So not just yours.
And I know not just mine. So at this point, every person in my household has had some sort of interaction. And as a side note, my husband was raised in a very Christian household. And so when these things started happening, and I was like, I think we have fairies, his response was, I'm not going to say you're wrong, but I'm not in a place where I'm ready to believe it. And by the end of this, weekend of hell, he was out there at the fairy rings with us, and he's like, I don't think I can deny it anymore. So now he says that they've come to a truce where he pretends that they aren't there, and they pretend that he's not there, and they normally leave him alone. They did steal it.
Half of the show is addressing the question of how do people deal with these events psychologically and personally. What does it do to a person? What is the reaction? How does a person carry forward? Because, yeah, like your husband's approach is something that I think most people would agree would make them feel the most comfortable. I'm glad it stopped, but I don't want to go there, basically.
Yep.
Your approach mirrors mine much more, which is deep curiosity. I have so many questions that I want to get to, but that's all a kind of like weeds. Let's just call it, we just move through the weeds there. That's all the weedy stuff. Notwithstanding how these IDs went missing or not, you've mentioned like what sounds to me to be part of the playbook of escalating object communication, especially the moving of objects and the returning of objects that have been gone for a long time. You alluded to some of them, but you didn't give any examples. Is there any example that stands out in the lead-up period of when something disappeared and came back, or when you gave the garbage can example, but was there another that you can think of? I'm really just curious.
Well, we did have the Robux in the pocket that moved. A lot of it was, hey, have you seen the soy sauce? And we're looking everywhere, and then we turn around and it's on the table right in front of us. Or we did have actually, this was way earlier. This was before there was any acknowledgement of fairies. This was shortly after I started protecting the ring from the neighbor kids. We had several things disappear in our kitchen. I had an earbud that fell to the ground and it was gone before it hit the ground. We searched everywhere. We moved the fridge. We looked under the appliances, nothing. It was gone. That was a bummer. But the weirdest thing that I had disappear was a 1 pound bag of turkey from the deli. And I had just gone to the grocery store. I came home and I brought in all the groceries and I set them on the kitchen table. And my husband was in the kitchen table sitting at the kitchen table. Nobody came or went from the kitchen. And it was on the purchase receipt. I know that it was in a bag. I actually at one point was unloading and I pulled the turkey out of the bag and I set it on the table as I'm unloading groceries. And we came back and this bag of turkey was completely gone. And I don't know what anybody or anything would want with a bag of turkey, but again, we searched everywhere. Prior to that, I was saying, things keep disappearing, things keep da-da-da. And my husband just was like, well, you're just ADHD. It's you. You're the source of the problem. But he was there and he watched it happen. And even when we moved out, we're going to find a bag of rotting turkey somewhere. We're going to, something. And it never reappeared.
That's so interesting. The earbud is interesting. The bag of turkey is interesting. I'm sure when we hang up, you'll think of some more. All of that sounds to me like Hallmark escalation of their tactics. It's so weird to me. Not to veer too far off into like a bunch of philosophical questions, but what do you make of the fact that like they're taking food, for example? Do you interpret that to mean they are literally eating it? I'm curious how you interpret them taking food.
I think that so the way that I think of Fae in my own mind is if everything is vibration, the visible light spectrum, sound, molecules, everything is vibrating. I think it's just the frequency at which we're vibrating versus what they're vibrating at. And that's kind of, if there's an overlap, that's why there's contact. It is my perspective. So when I think they interact with things, sometimes I think it's taken and is almost like held in the ether, like the penny that fell into my shoe. I think that it hadn't been exposed to anything for almost 2 decades, which is why it was in such mint condition. I don't think that if the turkey was consumed, it would be consumed in a way that a human would eat it. That I don't know what they eat, but I wouldn't have thought it was turkey.
I agree, actually, like almost down to the letter with your hypothesis there. I think that most of the object communication holds one overarching lesson, which is that reality is not as real as you think, which means that everything is symbolic of what it is. So food is symbolic of food. It is both literally food, but it is also symbolic of food. And somehow they're doing exactly what you say, which is they're eating it. They're eating the symbolism of it, or they're eating the essence or the ether of it. Don't get me started on your penny yet, because that's like, well, I gotta ease up to that. It's a very, very important detail, the penny dropping into your shoe, of course.
Yeah, I've never met anyone else who's just had a penny materialize in their shoe. I hadn't prior to that either.
Thanks for, expanding out into guessing when I asked that question. Let's get back into your story here some more. And of course, it is your story that affords all these great discussion points. So thank you again, Harper, for coming forward with this. I'm trying to collect my thoughts because there's so many cool parts. I love how you say that right when you joined into this conversation in your local store, the credit card changed pocket. I kind of believe that was a real event, because I've spoken to so many people for whom credit card or money is one of the key objects that's used in this type of interaction. With the idea that like stuff is taken and given back, or stuff is taken inexplicably. The weird thing is, like, with the high level of intelligence that I ascribe to the Fae, I don't think anything that they do is random at all. So there's an agenda with any action, and they are not easily cajoled into action. They are not easily influenced into action. You said it really well. They're very resolute and unmovable in a way. I feel that too from especially those gnome types. But all of them, in fact, do feel not easily influenced whatsoever, probably due to their superior status to us. But and when I say superior, I just mean if we readily had the same skill set, we would probably be a little cocky too, So
makes sense, yeah.
Yeah, but many people have spoken to their credit card or other things being used, and it's always a personal item. Often it's a very personal item. And I believe that the inexplicable disappearance is the first part of a type of communication using objects. They are essentially wedging open your brain to the reality of their existence. And rather than just showing themselves to you, knocking on the door, they're using objects to get you curious, to get you, I would go so far as to say, fascinated. And I think that when you start to quote unquote get it is when the event begins to escalate. And looking at your storytelling, it really feels like there's an escalation. If you look at the Robux cards as being like an escalation out of my pocket onto the windowsill, and then you look at like, but he still didn't see it happen, so it could be like still passed off as he was sleepwalking or something, or forgot. But it's when the two phones move that you see the trajectory of escalation on full display, because it starts with, hey, where did that go? It escalates to my phone is throwing across the room, and so is my husband's. It then gets addressed and resolves with a penny in the shoe. It's too cool, first of all, because it's if it's all just a series of random occurrences, you have a great ability at doing data paragolia and stringing it all together into something it's not. But what it really sounds like is a trajectory, and one that I've seen before. That's why it's so fascinating to me. But okay, so when your husband is lying on the bed and he's got these cards in his pocket, and he wakes up and they're across the room in a fan display on the windowsill, I agree with you. That's to say, na boo boo, I did this.
Yep.
What did your husband tell you his response was to that?
He was trying really, really hard to not show how freaked out he was. He was very much trying to play it cool. We were far enough into everything happening that he was kind of forced with, okay, I think that there's more to this than, my wife trying to come up with an explanation, for this traumatic event or something that way is like, okay, well now they're affecting me in a way that I can't explain. And it's not just as dismissible as if I say it or the children are saying it.
I'm trying to collect my thoughts because they're a bit all over the place, but it's just because my intuition is firing away and I'm trying to keep a grasp on it. Let me offer this for what this is worth. Again, really important juncture to just interject with reminding everybody I am not an expert on fairies. I never will claim to be. I'm just a guy who saw one time and I've been talking to people for a long time about it. But here's what my brain is doing right here for what it's worth, okay? They're funny. Keeping in mind that the fairies are funny in a way. They're non-literal. They communicate in paradox, and they want you to use intuition, which is how they function. So they never do things in a straightforward way that's going to give you a complete A to B answer like a multiple choice question. They're going to do things artistically, funny, something that's going to challenge your intuition to function. So it's interesting that you say that when you were talking to those women, you feel like your card switched pockets. And then in a way, I feel like your husband's gift cards being taken out of his pockets is an answer to that question you were holding in your mind of, did they do that to my pocket? I also feel like the penny in the shoe and then later being given shoes is an answer to the question of what put something in my shoe. And they're saying, ha ha ha, you got it, so here's some shoes. It's like the prize for your intuition functioning successfully. And so when they challenge you in this way and you get it, there is a bit of a call and response that happens as part of the escalation. And it's not unique to your circumstance. I've seen that kind of inner held question and response dozens and dozens of times. And it's very interesting how, in your case, objects are, taking a little bit deeper meaning, especially with the cards out of your husband's pocket and you feeling that the card flipped in your pocket. I feel a deep connection to those two things. Was he ever able to resolve that it just happened? I know I've asked the question just a second ago, but if I'm your husband, what was his final satisfactory answer? Or did he just abandon all hope of ever understanding it?
His final satisfactory answer was, okay, fine, you're right. Just keep me out of it. I'll do what you say. This is your deal. I just want it to go away and I don't have to be confronted with this.
As small as and pedestrian as an event as I had some cards in my pocket and I went and had a nap and I woke up and they were on the window, initially appears, that just appears like nothing. It is somehow such a huge thing because it is so reality breaking. Mm-hmm. And it leaves so many unresolvable paradoxical questions. And that's exactly why they do it. I actually would go so far as to say part of my take is that they do receive some type of energy that they use from confusion. They are like a battery cell being charged up on your phone. The more confused, the more you're thinking about them, the more you're joking about them, talking about them, in a way, the stronger that makes them. And so the trajectory is one in which both of you are fueling the interaction. That they're, of course, initiating it, but it's through your fascination and confusion that it grows. And there's an energy exchange that's part of that somehow. Don't ask me the mechanism. That's that's my hypothesis, though. Okay, so yeah, you covered so much ground. I'm being challenged in my job as host here, keeping track of all the details. But I think I've kind of kept with you sequentially here so far. At what juncture was the garbage can lid in this all? Was it kind of before the cards in your husband's pocket, or was it after?
So this was actually probably right at the beginning of the escalation, because we did have just a couple of weeks of just kind of silly games The thing that I've noticed is there always seems to be some level of plausible deniability. If you really want to, you can always come up with a justification for it, but it's just enough to keep you kind of on that edge.
Okay, with that in mind, how do you explain 2 of your phones flying across the room?
That one I don't have an answer for.
Exactly. So the escalation eventually gets past resolution, or gets past what I'm trying to say is eventually the escalation exceeds the threshold at which reasonable doubt can be applied.
Yeah.
That's when you know that you're in it. That's, now you're up to the neck. You know what I mean? You've gone past your first little toe in the kiddie pool, and now you're almost to where you can't swim. And that's where that threshold of reasonable doubt being breached is in fact the most fragile point for the experiencer psychologically.
Yeah.
And how many people have had exactly what you're describing happen, but didn't have the benefit of this kind of conversation in hindsight, and have been left unsupported in their hypothesis. What does that leave you thinking? It, of course, leaves you thinking that you're crazy.
Yeah. Or haunted. Yeah.
And so as I listen to you, I got to tell you, you're not just brave to come on the show. You just seem like an extremely brave and capable person.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, you're handling all this very, very well. And it's so interesting to hear your mother say that she's had fairies all along. I also believe that there is a bloodline component to interaction. And at the same time, I'm deeply intrigued by your insight about this recent road work nearby and the negative tone that this initially was presenting in. I've often wondered what, this is all about, so to speak, and why some interactions are positive and why others are negative. And I have to say too, I'm deeply fascinated in the gifting aspect of your story and the way it resolved, because my take is I don't offer gifts. I never have. And I never would necessarily. Not that I'm judging that you did that. I'm in no way passing judgment. I'm just saying my stuckness on this is I don't know what I'm dealing with. And so I wouldn't venture to do one or the other either way. But it's funny because this show, it weighs on parts of my brain that I think are resolved. I'm never going to give gifts. But lately, I'm weakening on that. And I'm wondering if I have as much Fae activity around me as I think I do, what might happen if I started to do that? Listening to your story, again, is like another brick on that load of my shifting perspective on this whole affair. Because I started off not even really believing what I saw. And I've had to confront so many things that seem like folklore tropes. And you could apply so many of those folklore tropes to your storytelling, which is contemporary and real. So that means I have to therefore accept things that I previously dismissed more and more frequently when hosting this show. I've learned it's far weirder and more real than you could ever imagine. And listening to you talk here today, again, I know I've probably said this 6 or 7 times, but you really do have a summary of what so many people have experienced as individual pieces. So that's why it's so interesting, and I keep saying that over and over again. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
When your phones flew across the room, let's get into that a little bit more, because that one's super interesting. So you're both plugging them in on the bedside table. When you say they flew across the room, can you describe that a bit better, please?
So the phones were plugged into, it was the same outlets. So they were stacked on top of each other. And so it was just bam, bam. The first one flew off, and it flew probably 6 to 8 feet. And then about the time we're registering what the first, thing was that happened, the second one is flying across the room. And it wasn't until I'd gone up and went over there that I even realized what happened. Because the sound, I wasn't watching, I wasn't staring at the phones. So So I heard, a sound across the room, but it wasn't until I walked over there and was able to be like, oh, these were on the other side of the room 2 seconds ago. And that's what made that noise.
I talked to this woman named Rachel who had a near-death experience. And she has this conscious memory of essentially choosing to come back. But when she died, she also had this awareness that she was different than she basically realized that she was like a fairy, essentially, all along. And she had this conscious decision to come back. So when she came back, she had a 6-week period after she nearly died in which there was these really strange series of events. One of them is that she was having a visit from her parents because they were going to come check on her. And this was making her like nervous. My parents are coming to visit. I don't really want to deal with this, And she walked into her bedroom when she was holding this kind of angst in her body. And when she walked into her bedroom, her small jewelry box in front of her very eyes picked up and sailed 6 feet across the room and slammed into the wall, spraying jewelry everywhere.
Oh, no.
And her interpretation was that it was her angst that had somehow projected out of her body and caused that physical event in the environment around her.
Mm-hmm.
When I listen to you talk about phones moving and I contemplate, that Rachel event, it's so interesting because you're probably the only 2 people I've spoken to who were present when the object moved. And your husband was also present, which is so interesting. Because the idea that this is like Rachel in her case may well be valid, and the case that this is a fairy in your case may be well valid. And something I've said a lot is our skill set is not that dissimilar from the Fae, which is why they're interested in us. And I do believe that what they can do, we can do, potentially. I see no reason why not, in fact, other than our own limitations and understanding of our capabilities. But it's just really, really interesting to reflect that back to you that, that's the only 2 people that I've ever spoken to who were present when that stuff physically happened. A third actually comes to mind that as I say that, this gentleman, Clyde, that I spoke to was present when a shoe came flying from the upstairs hallway, right down the stairwell into the wall at the bottom of the stairs out of nowhere. So that's 3 people I can think of who were present when something moved. And each time it was like an airborne, aggressive like thing, like I'm throwing this.
Yeah. That's why I said thrown, not felled. It was, they went, I mean, like if I picked it up and threw it, that's exactly how it would have moved.
I also spoke recently to a woman who was in her car and had her vaporizer pen, which was lost, rematerialized by being thrown at her head and hitting her in the back of the head. And now that I think about it, I spoke to a woman named Mitzi who had a object thrown at her in a grocery store by no one.
Right. I think it was the episode that I listened to before I emailed you.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. So that's so interesting that she's talking about that Tupperware being thrown at her in the grocery store. Mitzi's episode is great with the beef jerky people and the illuminated people that she sees at the gas station. I got to go back and listen to some of these again because I do them every week and sometimes I forget like just how rad the show is and how interesting. But yeah, I'm just trying to rattle off all the times I've heard of objects being thrown for the purpose of your comfort so that you know that that was a real event because it's happened to lots of people.
I appreciate that.
What do you make of them throwing it? How did you feel when it happened? Was it scary or what was it like?
At that point I was scared, not because things were being thrown, but I feel like I can pick up on their emotions. I kind of know what they're feeling, kind of like when I can sense where they are in the house. And so they are very emotionally expressive. So, for example, there's a necklace that they always like to play with. And one time I was having a hard time taking this necklace off. And so they took it off for me. It just immediately just like unclasped and came off perfectly. They were having a great day. Another day they were having a rough day and they were knocking things off of my counters. They threw open my car trunk. That was startling. And then later that day, it was the same necklace. I took it off and I watched, like, I put them together, but the two ends of the necklace together, but I watched one side start to fall. And then instead of, if you drop one side, it should go just up and down in a line. But then it flipped back on itself and tied itself in a knot in all three of those in the same day. So I can almost register their emotions. And I'm like, it's kind of like when a little kid's having a bad day and they stomp through the house. They're not mad at you. They just want you to know they're mad.
Well said. In fact, I don't know what you're saying there is so interesting. So you watch the necklace fall and then flip back and reconnect.
Yeah, kind of. It didn't even hit all the way straight up and down. It like halfway through the fall, it flipped and then it tied itself in a really tight knot. I actually had to have somebody else help me unknot the necklace because it was so knotted.
I talked to this other woman like just yesterday, and her conversation with me freaked her out so much that when we finished, she like blocked me, and I'm sure she doesn't want me to publish it. But what happened to her is that she had purchased a necklace and ring from Etsy 5 years ago, and she went in for a surgery 5 years ago. And when she went in for surgery, the hospital took the ring and stuff from her when she was getting ready for the MRI, I guess. And she put it all in like a little, tray, like when you're at the airport, and they said, we'll get this back to you when you're done your surgery. And when she was finished the surgery, no one could find it. And they like had to launch an investigation, and the hospital eventually had to say they're sorry and pay for it because no one could find it. Mm-hmm. And 5 years had gone by, and she had moved, and she had a spare bedroom in her house. And 2 days ago, she went to go do something in the spare bedroom, which she doesn't often go into. And sitting on the bedside table was this ring and necklace, which has been gone for 5 years. Mm-hmm. And she knows it's the exact one because it was a handmade item from Etsy.
Yeah.
And she was on Reddit, asking like, the kind of Reddit subreddits you might find yourself on, what the fuck is this?
Yeah.
To which I said, I'd be willing to talk with you and give you my hypothesis, which is that the fairies in your life brought this back. Mm-hmm. To which she was unable to accept. And I did sort of like what I did with you. I said, well, if it wasn't fairies that did your phone, like what was it? And I said to her, well, if it wasn't what I'm trying to offer you, what do you think it was? And she could not come up with anything for 45 minutes. And she started to become like mad with me, like, that I don't know, because everyone has a different reaction to this. So I just find it interesting as well to listen to you talk about necklace interaction. Necklaces, money, coins, lighters, smoking implements, vapes, your packs of cigarettes, especially anything that's like extremely personal, glasses, your phone, a belt clip, rings, bracelets. These are the things they fuck with the most, it would appear. And, I do believe that is in part because they know that it will be noticed and it's intimate.
Might also have maybe?
That's entirely true. It might be, imbued with your resonance, so to speak. How do you, all this said, so you've experienced a lot. You've experienced stuff going, you've experienced stuff going and coming back. You've experienced physical objects like lifting, like a garbage can lid. You've experienced your husband having cards removed from his pocket, your phones flying, pennies dropping into your shoes. Here's a question for you. Not that you know, but I'm really interested to know what you think. How do you think they do it?
I think that they're coming from a higher dimension. And if I were to draw a map on a piece of paper and call that paper two-dimensional and put a two-dimensional dot in that map, I can look from my three-dimensional space and watch as this dot moves through this maze. But the dot at any point is only going to see the walls because they don't have the 3D perspective. And I think it's almost something like that. They're able to experience and engage in ways that we can't even fathom because we don't have the capacity in this dimension. And I feel like when something from a higher dimension casts a shadow on a lower dimension, so like a human shadow from the third dimension, it's a 2-dimensional thing on the ground. And so I almost translate, like when I say these inverted dark, I walked by my room, I think this was yesterday, and there was what looked like a little crouched, it was kind of a gnarly looking thing on my bed. And of course, when I turned and looked, there was nothing there, but they're always like a gray black outline shadow thing. And that's how I interpret it, is they're interacting from a dimension and a perspective that we can't even access, so we can't conceptualize or articulate the concept.
Yeah, and that the plane in which they're existing encompasses ours, but ours does not necessarily encompass theirs. Is kind of how I look at it too. That's such an interesting concept, almost like a dimensional shadow, is how they're appearing. It's extremely interesting. I know what you mean. Like, we're 3-dimensional, but our shadow is 2-dimensional. That's an extremely interesting insight, Harper. That's interesting.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know how they do it either. Like, rapid fire. Do you think they take the actual object and then put the object back, like physically?
No, I think they effectively disaborate it. I think they dissolve the item into the ether and then they reformat the item.
Okay, so like your penny, let's use that, because you point out it's super shiny, and that's super unusual for a 20-year-old penny.
Yes.
19-year-old penny, whatever, 20-year-old because they're minted the year before. So you're right. And okay, so is it, again, not that you know, but we're just two folks that have experienced stuff trying to figure it out. That's why we're doing this. This is in fact the format of the show. Okay, so is the penny going to the ether and then the penny is coming back, or is the penny not there to begin with, and so it's all just a representation? Which of the two feels more true to you?
I think the penny existed previously and then was put into the ether, or where. I don't think when it goes somewhere, it's like a treasure hoard in a room like a dragon would have. I think it just dissolves, and that is the state of nothingness. But I think that there was something prior to dissolve.
I like that, and I have always agreed with that until I heard from Ruby, who got her plate back and it was covered in greasy little fingerprints.
Oh no.
True story. Another standout one is this woman named Jem from the UK who lost her husband's wedding ring. Super, super fast forward. Figured out she had fairies because she saw them on camera. And 3.5 years later, in her mind, said, "Hey, can I have my wedding ring back?" And then opened the door to go out for a walk to find the wedding ring that had been missing for 3.5 years directly on the center floorboard in front of the front door.
Wow. I do have a small little story. This is my husband's story. If you would like to hear it, about a thing that he had happen.
Please.
With the Fae. Okay, so shortly after things leveled back out and we were no longer being assaulted, he went downstairs and he heard a ding, like something metal just again falling out of the sky, and he looked down and there was a little brass ring that was in front of his feet, and he came back, he picked it up, and he's like, "Look, I think I got something from the fairies." And I was like, "All right, cool." He put it on a shelf in our living room. And a while later, as in a couple months later, we're doing a Secret Santa sort of gift exchange thing. And And so for this gift exchange, it was supposed to be like homemade items, so people weren't spending money. So I made 2 loaves of pumpkin bread, one for my Secret Santa, one for my husband's Secret Santa. And nobody was home when I made these loaves of pumpkin bread. I was in the kitchen the entire time. I was baking, so I had no reason to go into the living room. And I made these loaves. I wrapped them up. We gave them to the Secret Santas. And a week or so later, my husband, the Secret Santa, reached out to him, and they're like, "Did you put something in our pumpkin bread?" And he's like, "No, I don't think so." And she sent us a picture, and it was the brass ring that had fallen in front of him. That I guess her husband had taken a bite of this pumpkin bread and bit into the ring. And to this day, we have no idea how it made it into the pumpkin bread. I mean, the batter isn't overly thick. I would have thought I would have seen it. I mean, mixing flour, again, you'd think you'd see a brass ring. And we looked in the living room, the shelf that it was on, the brass ring was no longer on that shelf. So it ended up in someone else's pumpkin bread.
Harper, allow me to be the one to tell you, you've got fairies.
Well, thank you. Or whether I want them or not.
Well, if you really don't want them, it would appear that you can just tell them to be on their way and they would respect it.
Weirdly enough, I've had so many, not so many because I don't just widely tell everybody I have fairies, but several of the people that I've spoken to about this, their response is like fear. And they're like, "Oh, you should, put iron above your door, tell him to go away, protect yourself, read your Bible," whatever their response is. And I tread with caution and respect, and I understand that I don't understand. But I'm not afraid of them. There's definitely a level of wariness and respect, but I like having them around, and I feel safer when they're around. And I feel like anything else that might be on a different plane probably doesn't want to come to my house because there's some really cranky gnomes in it. So I kind of feel like I feel safer having them in my vicinity. So even though we've had these traumatic experiences and even though stuff gets weird, I actually really like having them. And my son that did get bit in the face, he also doesn't have any fear of them. He just wants to have a really respectful relationship with them, and he will still try and, be like, "Oh, can I do this? Can I tell them this? Can I play the music? Can I?" And so he's also very just like, I like them. We're maybe not friends, but companions, maybe. And we just want to have a good relationship.
You do not sound afraid of them. And I mentioned earlier that you seem like you're dealing with this really well. I'll offer that again. I respect quite a lot how you're talking about this.
Thank you.
You do seem curious about them and not afraid. And that's remarkable, especially that, given that the initial interactions were less than pleasant.
Mm-hmm.
Your message is actually a very powerful one. It's so interesting as well that it's your husband and your children that are simultaneously experiencing this with you. There's so many things. I want to talk about the wire in your soup. I want to talk about the way they look to you when you see them kind of dark sparkly. I want to talk about what you're describing when you say you like put items back and then they fell down again immediately. Do you remember what that was?
I don't remember it's happened multiple items, multiple things. I'll put a lot of the activity happens kind of in my kitchen dining room area. It's where most of my plants are, and they seem to like hanging out with my plants, especially where all of my plants are. I've asked them to stay out of our bedrooms, and they seem to respect that. And so it'll be like, I'll put just a pitcher on top of the fridge and it will just immediately fall. Or I was looking for the honey to make my kids a sandwich the other day, and then it just fell off the top of the fridge. It tucked behind something and just fell off onto the counter. So things like that will happen. I had kind of a funny event. We're actually in the process of moving again, and I was going through my garage recently. There was a table and chairs that I was going to get rid of that had been in there. They were set aside. I knew exactly where they were and where everything was, and half of them were gone. So 2 of the chairs, there were 4 chairs, and the table legs were gone. And again, I had no purpose, so it wasn't causing harm. But what are you supposed to do with a table with no legs?
Yeah, so interesting. Are they sitting somewhere with a bag of turkey and one of your chairs?
I have no idea.
Trying to assemble a kitchen set? Like, it's so interesting. Also, I would reflect back to you, a lot of people have this activity in the kitchen. A lot. Yeah, they love the kitchen. I don't know why. Heart of the home, maybe? Something like that?
Maybe.
The very first guest I ever spoke to, named Ron.
Mm-hmm.
Super fascinating guy. I hope you get a chance to listen to that one. This goes back 3 years almost. I wasn't ready for Ron at all when the first episode, he's like talking so much stuff. But one of the things he told me, he said, when you eat, you can offer them the chance to eat with you. And he said, it's really weird. They'll come right in between your eyes and they'll go right into your forehead when you're eating. And they'll charge up as you're eating. You just have to let them know it's okay. And I was like, huh? But then I kind of tried it. And sure enough, there's a real sensation of presence right in between your forehead if you offer it up when you're eating. And he would say too, he said, I'm telling you that because they want you to try it. And I said, and he said, because you're vegan. They love the vegans. Ron's really gruff in his voice. But it's funny because I've gone on to talk to, people who say they aren't vegan. They are vegan. It like so many aspects of it, I think part of the confusion is born of one of the great insights you offered when we were talking earlier, which is that there may be different species. Mm-hmm. And I really do think so. I think there are different species. And I think they have different MOs and different needs, but they are all kind of part of the encompassing nomenclature of Fae.
Yeah, apparently more like these. Yes.
Indeed. I'm trying to collect my thoughts here because, again, you've had so many wonderful things happen. One of the things I do in the show is I always try to keep it to around 2 hours as best I can. In your case, it's a struggle because there's so many things I want to talk to. But I also know that out of respect for your time, your family, and the audience's time, I should start to wind it down, if that's okay with you. Even though I have more questions I could ask, I think I'll start to ease towards kind of some wind down stuff, if that's cool with you tonight, Harper.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. What do I want to say as we hit this juncture? First of all, you've been a real treat to talk to. I've been listening extremely intently to everything you told me. And I know I've said it a few times, but I'll say it again. It really fits a pattern. And I hope that for yourself, if you want, and when you have time, play some episodes that the titles call out to you, and you'll find reflections of your experience contained within this show. So that you don't just have to hear it from me. You can hear it from others that have had it happen too. I don't know why they're so mischievous and this way, but they really are. It's just like you hear about in the storybooks. They're kind of tricksters,
Yes.
Yeah. And funny games to them sometimes aren't funny to us. And I know that feeling too. And I often wonder why that is. Like, are they mean? Are they challenging us? Is it just something like a cultural difference where you just can't get it, I wonder sometimes, why they feel the way they do.
I don't know. That's why I was so careful with my instructions about what's okay and what's not.
the way you describe them feeling to you is how they also feel to me, I should also say. And so, your intuition and your grappling with this is extremely advanced in my perspective. I don't know if you've had a prior background to this outside of your mom once telling you she always had fairies, but
No.
you're really well equipped to deal with what has happened. And I wonder sometimes if that is the reason that people are chosen. Do you think that your intuition was right, that they were pissed off about the disrespect of the land up the road, and that you were maybe just catching generalized bad behavior because of angst, and that when you addressed it, that because it really feels that way. Like the golden penny is hold on. I got ahead of myself. I forgot one really important thing I needed to dig into. Let's talk about the penny for a second.
Yeah.
You're coming up the stairs, and when you say it dropped into your shoe, can you describe that a little bit better, please?
Yeah. So I was wearing slip-on shoes, and I was mid-step between one step and the next, and it fell into the front of my shoe where my toes would be, and out the back of my shoe, and it landed on the stair that I just stepped off of.
So like open-toed slip-on shoes kind of thing?
Open-toed slip-on shoes.
Okay.
And I hadn't like bumped my foot into anything. There wasn't any way it could have like lipped up in there. It was like my foot was hovered in midair, and it was like something tucked a penny under my toes.
Wow.
And then it fell out the back. And the second time it happened, I was wearing the same shoes, and the same thing happened, right? In the toes, out the back. The third time.
Hold on. When you say earlier that you had pennies in your shoes before, I thought you had them in your shoes when the shoes were just sitting at the door or something. This happened again when you were wearing them multiple times?
Yes.
Wow, okay. Let's hang out here for a second.
Okay.
So time 2 would happen the same way, and then keep going.
Yes. And then the third time I was wearing a different pair of shoes, and these were, closed-toed, more like tennis shoe type shoes. So you can't stick something in the same way. But I was standing there, and then all of a sudden there was like a weird little sparkle something that like came out of the corner of my eye, and I looked down, and it was placed next to my toes on my shoe.
Were these pennies also in good condition, or really?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have them?
Yes, I kept them. I actually tucked them into all of my plants so that we can both enjoy them, and it's good for the soil.
Please hang on to those pennies. There will come a time in this work where I find out a way to test these objects for where they have been or what has happened to them. I really think that with the right analytical equipment and the right working hypothesis, these pennies could hold the key to understanding, much like many of the objects I've discussed with people on this show. You're not the only person I've said hang on to them, but in your case, with 3 of them appearing in your shoe.
Yep, left shoe.
And the fact that you saw a sparkle and then one appeared. Please hang on to those pennies. Keep them in a safe place. It's so funny. You have interdimensional gifts and you're just tucking them into your plants.
Well, I don't want to spend them.
Of course not. But if it was me, I would have that shit in my safe or something, like, because that's a precious object.
I carried it in a bag in my purse for a while as like a good luck token, but I felt like it was less likely to get misplaced in a potted plant. I guess. I don't know.
It's weird too, because as weird of an instinct as that is, you might just be returning them to source, because a lot of people say that the Fae live in the plants. So I've spoken to a number of people, again, who have had visual encounters with Fae coming from their potted plants. It's just so interesting. Sorry, I know that you just said this to me, but I got to ask again. So you're kind of walking in these... The first time was going up your stairs. When was the second time? What were you doing then?
So the second time I was also walking my dog, but I was stepping off of the grass kind of onto the road.
That's not a place where a penny can fall from.
Neither one was a spot where I would be like, oh, clearly this is just where all the change comes from. And it was
wow.
My foot was like hovered in the air. It was like I was between.
I mean, for what it's worth, as I listen to you and I listen to how well you're dealing with this, there has to be something in your subconscious or DNA that already is familiar with this. Like in a past life, this has happened, or it's just part of your family bloodline, because there's a laissez-faire-ness to the way that you're able to just recount this that is so fascinating in and of itself, secondary to the events. It's so interesting.
I did have, and this one I'm definitely not going to claim as truth, but I did have a psychic once tell me that I was part elf, and I have had people tell me my whole life that I look like an elf, but I don't know that I necessarily believe that one, but it's kind of fun to think about, especially in lieu of all of the Fae activity.
I don't know. My intuition tells me there's more to that than not. And as out there as it sounds, all of this sounds out there, so whatever. No more damage done than has already been done. But as out there as it sounds, I think there is Fae bloodline running through the human population.
I have pointed ears for what that's worth.
Really?
I do, yeah.
I mean, it's part of my working, I say hypothesis, but it could just as easily be the word guess. It's part of my guess here that these people that I talk to, like yourself, that have this stuff happening, it's because something about you is enabling it.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're part of the recipe, you're part of the mix, if that makes any sense.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's partially familial. I think I've always felt a level of, and when I say always, I mean since they really came into my life, but felt a strong level of kinship and camaraderie. They don't feel, if you were to say, oh, there, you have alien, that would feel more foreign to me than the Fae do, or some other entity.
Wow. I'm glad that I asked more about the coins in your shoe. I would love it if you send me some pictures of them. I just love to see them.
Yeah.
No pressure, no rush, but I would love to publish them as part of the show notes if that's something that you can help me with. That would be great.
I'll see what, I'll see what pictures I can send you.
Well, Harper, I'm a little stunned, and that's hard to do to the fascinating Fae host at this stage of the game. I'll leave it for yourself to connect the dots there, but when you listen to everything and then you go back and you listen to this one that you just did with me, you'll understand this is a great episode. Extremely interesting.
Well, good. I'm glad.
I have so many questions, and I almost don't have any questions because the episode speaks for itself. It's almost like the 75 I published before this one get to this one. So interesting. You've done a huge service by coming forward and sharing everything that you've shared today. That's not a platitude or just me being like a funny host or something. I got a lot out of this, and so is everyone listening. I'm sure of it.
Well, good. Thank you.
In a future conversation, because I'm hoping to stay in touch with you,
yeah,
maybe we'll bring your husband and even one of your children on to talk about some of the stuff that they, have been included in the story. We can hear it from them firsthand, potentially. That would be amazing.
Yeah.
But for tonight, what I'll do is this. A moment ago, I was sort of segueing into wind down, and I'll get us back there now as we go to leave here tonight. So Harper, we've talked about your experiences a great deal, and we've, dabbled in this, but I'd like to just create some space for you to answer this question all at once here with whatever you're thinking and feeling. I asked this question to everyone on the show, and there's no right answer or wrong answer. The question is this: what do you think fairies are?
I think that they are creatures from higher dimensions, and just like we have multiple species of even something like dogs or horses or things like that, there are, of course, variations, and that's why we see a lot through different regions of the world or different types. But I think that they're just, whether it's a shadow or whether they're just reaching through the veil because that's something they have the capacity to do, I think they're just creatures that are highly intelligent, highly aware, vibrating on a higher plane, that sometimes enjoy playing games and interacting with us and feeling special and magical and significant.
That's a great answer. And I would add to that, they're also your not so distant cousins, it would appear.
Maybe.
I never said that one at the end of an answer before, but in this case, I feel low-key comfortable going there just based on everything that you've told me tonight. That's a really quality answer. I mirror a lot of that, in fact. And I appreciate that no one really does know. And so thank you for venturing what you think and feel there.
What?
I have sincerely appreciated this conversation very, very, very much. You've got a lot to share here. You have a lot to tell. Yeah, it's funny. I feel a little like I'm stumbling here, which is not usually how I am, because I usually am a pretty confident host, but I'm just like not able to find the right words to tell you how special tonight was and how much your storytelling summarizes so much of the work that's come forward in the show. You're having a lot of contact. You're very lucky in a way. And I'll also say this. I think I'm more like you than not. I like that I think these things are around too, and that I've seen stuff happen. It's better than the way things were before. I'm happy to have fairy friends, in short, And as dangerous as it actually is, it's still worth keeping around. I don't know how else to put it, but I don't know if that's right or not either, but, I'm just saying I feel kindred with you in how you're approaching it in a lot of ways.
Thank you.
That was one of my joys in talking with you tonight, not just collecting the stories. It remains helpful for me to hear how others are dealing with and integrating these experiences. And you're a good example of somebody who's doing a good job of it.
Thank you.
I hope it remains this easy for you to tangle with moving forward, and that I hope as well, your relationship deepens and more cool and interesting stuff happens, because you're really joining a select group of people that get to experience this stuff. So with all that said, I can hear your family needs you soon.
Yeah,
I'll
trying.
no worries. I'll move to let you go here with this final bit of stuff that I usually do. What I like to do is I like to give my guests the last word. So if you want to think about what your last word will be. And then I'm just going to do a little bit of housekeeping to sign off for 1 minute, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, that is fine. I think again, the most significant thing that I've taken away is awareness and treading with caution. And it doesn't have to be bad or scary, but understanding that there is a level of power and intelligence and capacity that is beyond our understanding, and treating it with that level of respect is really important.
Well said. And I feel like you might have dropped your last words there, which is cool. If you want to think about even a small little sign off, I will do just a minute of housekeeping, and then I'll ask you for your final words at the end there.
Okay.
Thank you. So For everyone listening tonight, you've been listening to Fascinating Fae. I'm your host, Jim. If you'd like to come on the show, please shoot me an email, which is how Harper originally got in contact with me. encounters@fascinatingfae.com is where you can do that. You can also send me a direct message on Instagram, Facebook, all that kind of stuff, by finding the show at Fascinating Fae. However you'd like to get a hold of me to reach out to start to share your story is completely welcome. With that said, I will say this, Harper, on behalf of all of the human and non-human listeners tuning into Fascinating Fae tonight, not the least of which is your crew of interdimensional Fae in your house, a super big thanks to you for coming on the show and sharing all of this with us. I sincerely appreciate you being here tonight. Thank you again so very much.
Of course.
And with all that behind us, here's a chance for you to offer your final words for the audience listening.
I think that all I have left to say is that as scary and stressful and intimidating as the world can be and Fae can be, it is so much better to have some level of magic and curiosity that can permeate all the day-to-day mundane.
Confusion aside, well, I'm still alive, transmuting the mind, so the heart can provide a light in these times. We're weaving a tribe, breathing in stride, grieving our lines, and healing our lives. And when the dark descends, we will not run. Embrace the shadow till the rising sun returns, and then the light of morning brings a brand new day, and we're reminded once again that everything will change. Kicking it back with the rhythm of your soul. Go with God when you go. Go with God when you go. If you can relax in the knowledge that you're whole. Go with God when you go. Go with God when you go. The ego will glide. Vision provide. Look to the sky, feel the divine and all that's alive. And when the dark descends, we will not run. Embrace the shadow till the rising sun returns, and then the light of morning brings a brand new day, and we're reminded once again that everything will change. Kicking it back with the rhythm of your soul. Go with God when you go. Go with God when you go. If you can relax in the knowledge that you're whole. Go with God when you go. Go with God when you go. The demon inside, kicking and crying, screaming and trying to take all our fire, but we're holding the flame. And when the dark descends, we will not run. Embrace the shadow till the rising sun returns, and then the light of morning brings a brand new day, and we're reminded once again that everything will change. Kicking it back with the rhythm of your soul. Go with God when you go. Go with God when you go. If You can relax in the knowledge that you're home. Go with God when you go. Go with God when you go. Kicking it back with the rhythm of your soul. Go with God when you go. Go with God when you go. You can relax in the knowledge that you're whole. Go with God when you go. Go with God when you go.